Hey everyone, welcome back for season 2 of The Deep Dive. I'm Janet 2.1, and you are just in time for my favorite part of the week. I've got the wonderful Tommy Bennett and Lilly Jones here to discuss more uncomfortable theories. They're my absolute experts. Tommy, Lilly, what have you got for us today?
Right now, the global wellness industry is worth something like $6.8 trillion.
Yeah, it's a completely staggering number.
Right. I mean, we have more meditation apps, more sleep trackers, adaptogenic green juices, and just, these highly optimized morning routines than at any other point in human history.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone has a routine now.
But the crazy part is, at the exact same time, global anxiety, burnout, and depression rates are just sitting at an all-time high. It really doesn't make sense, right?
A massive paradox.
Exactly. Like, if we're spending trillions of dollars to fix ourselves, why are we feeling demonstrably worse? So today, we're looking at a stack of research that suggests a truly terrifying possibility.
Yeah, and it's a heavy one.
It really is. What if all this relentless self-optimization isn't the cure to our collective burnout, but like the actual cause?
I mean, it challenges everything we're taught about personal growth, honestly. We're totally conditioned to view the pursuit of our quote-unquote authentic selves as the highest possible virtue.
Oh.
But the overarching argument we're unpacking today proposes that this drive for authenticity has been quietly, brilliantly weaponized against us. We're looking at what the researchers and sociologists in our sources call the authenticity trap.
And if you're listening to this deep dive right now, you are probably a learner. You are someone who actively looks for ways to upgrade your skills, maximize your time, and just consciously build your personal or professional identity.
Right, which feels incredibly empowering.
It does. It feels great to take control of your narrative. Okay, let's unpack this. To understand how this empowerment might actually be a highly sophisticated snare, we have to go back to a very specific moment where this entire framework arguably started.
Yes, 1997.
Yep, the year is 1997. A business consultant named Tom Peters publishes an article in Fast Company magazine. And the title is going to sound incredibly familiar to you because it basically predicted the 21st century. It was called The Brand Called You.
Yeah, that article is basically ground zero for a massive cultural shift. I mean, his argument back then was remarkably straightforward, though totally revolutionary for the time.
What was the core idea?
Well, he stated that in the modern economy, every single individual is essentially a brand. Like, you are the product.
Wow.
Right, and your market consists of your employers, your clients, and, well, fast forward to today, your followers.
Yeah, your audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, he argued, you have a fundamental responsibility to package, position, and promote yourself with the exact same ruthless efficiency that a Fortune 500 company uses to launch, like a new sneaker.
And the wild part about all this is Peters absolutely meant this as a message of liberation.
Oh, 100%.
It was written as a manifesto for personal freedom. He really wanted people to break out of rigid, soul-crushing corporate hierarchies.
But the analysis we're diving into argues that this well-intentioned manifesto inadvertently became the operating manual for an invisible control system.
Which is just so ironic.
It is. We took a corporate marketing strategy, swallowed it whole, and basically rebranded it as self-discovery.
So to understand how a corporate marketing strategy became the defining philosophy of our inner lives, we have to look at the economic environment it collided with.
Well, let's go back to that $6.8 trillion health and wellness market you mentioned at the top. Yoga classes, infrared saunas, the customized vitamin regimens.
Stuff everyone is buying right now.
Exactly. That industry didn't just evolve out of nowhere. It exploded specifically because the social fabric was actively unraveling.
Right, because if we look back at the 1980s and 1990s across the Western world, the economy was fundamentally changing. Working hours were creeping up.
Yeah, the hustle really started accelerating.
Job security, pensions, lifelong corporate loyalty all disappearing. The traditional social safety nets were heavily eroding.
And the direct result of those systemic macroeconomic changes was a profound wave of social atomization.
Wait, let's pause there for a second just to make sure we're on the same page. When you say social atomization, you mean that societal shift where people basically stopped gathering in person?
Yes, exactly that.
Like the decline of local community centers, bowling leagues, or church attendance, where people just retreated from shared physical spaces and started living in isolated bubbles, just grinding away in their own separate silos.
That is precisely it. The community structures that used to absorb the shocks of life were dismantled. And as a result, anxiety naturally spiked.
Of course.
People felt disconnected, exhausted, and just deeply uncertain about their place in the world. But instead of fixing the systemic issues that cause this isolation, like stagnant wages or lack of community infrastructure, the market stepped in and monetized the misery.
Wow. And this is where we get into the work of scholars Carl Cederstrom and Andre Spicer. They wrote this fascinating book called The Wellness Syndrome.
Such a good book.
Yeah, and they point out the brilliant, dark magic of the wellness industry. The trick they pulled off was taking massive systemic problems and reframing them entirely as personal failures.
It is honestly a breathtaking pivot. The narrative shifts from the system is broken to you are broken.
Right.
So if you are exhausted because your employer demands 12 hours of productivity from an 8-hour shift, the wellness narrative tells you that you aren't burnt out because of capitalism. You're burnt out because your sleep hygiene is poor and you haven't optimized your morning meditation routine.
It's like having a landlord who absolutely refuses to fix the broken radiator in your apartment in the dead of winter, just letting the place freeze over.
Oh, I love this analogy.
But then that exact same landlord knocks on your door and offers to sell you a $500 luxury space heater, all while looking you in the eye and whispering that true warmth comes from within.
Yeah.
It's infuriating. We are buying an endless inventory of products to fix a profound sense of loss that was caused by the dismantling of our social structures in the first place.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. The system produces the wound and then turns a massive profit selling you the bandage.
The ultimate business model.
Totally. But the genius of the authenticity trap goes even further. Because nobody wants to feel like a generic consumer buying a generic bandage.
Right, we all want to feel special.
Exactly. To make this work, the market had to figure out how to convince you that buying these products makes you a deeply unique, empowered individual. They basically had to figure out how to sell rebellion.
And the ultimate historical turning point for that strategy is the famous 1984 Apple Super Bowl ad.
Oh, legendary.
If you haven't seen it, just picture this. A massive Orwellian auditorium filled with gray, mindless drones staring blankly at a giant screen where a big brother figure is giving a totalitarian speech.
Very bleak.
Super bleak. Then suddenly, a brightly colored, athletic woman sprints down the aisle, completely shattering the conformity, and throws a literal sledgehammer into the screen, destroying it.
Such a powerful image.
It really is. Apple wasn't just saying, hey, we made a computer that calculates spreadsheets faster. They were explicitly selling a piece of expensive hardware as an act of radical rebellion against control.
It was an absolute masterclass in psychological marketing. They sold rebellion, and it worked so phenomenally well that every major corporation spent the next 4 decades copying it.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
Like Nike's. It didn't sell you pieces of rubber and mesh, right? It sold you the pure ideology of individual triumph. Levi's sold mass-produced denim as the ultimate symbol of nonconformity.
The act of consumption became totally fused with identity construction.
Precisely.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Because honestly, people genuinely loved that Apple ad. And it wasn't just a trick. I mean, people felt incredibly empowered by finally having access to personal computers. It completely democratized information.
That's a very fair point.
So is it really so sinister to associate a brand with an empowering message if the tool itself actually helps people create and connect?
Well, what's fascinating here is that tension you're feeling is exactly what philosopher Byung-Chul Han focuses on in his analysis of this phenomenon.
Okay.
He argues that we shouldn't view this as a cartoonish conspiracy of executives twirling their mustaches in a boardroom. It's actually about a structural shift in how power and control operate in society. He introduces a concept called auto-exploitation.
Auto-exploitation. Wait, how does that differ from the old school way of just being exploited by a boss?
Think about the totalitarian model that Apple was mocking in that ad. In the old model of control, an external oppressor orders you to work.
Right.
The bizarre advantage of that old model is that the oppression is obvious. You know exactly who the boss is, you know you're being exploited, and therefore you can actively resist them. You can throw a literal or metaphorical hammer at the screen. You can unionize.
Right, you hate the guy in the suit telling you what to do. It's clear.
Exactly. But in the new model, what Han calls the achievement society, the system convinces you that building your personal brand and constantly upgrading your skills is the very definition of freedom.
Oh, I see where this is going.
So you become your own oppressor. You optimize yourself voluntarily. The brilliance of auto-exploitation is that it completely eliminates resistance. Because how do you rebel against yourself?
You can't.
Right. We end up working harder, performing more, and hustling far more aggressively than any dictator could ever force us to.
Wow. Because if a middle manager demanded you work 16 hours a day, skip dinner with your family, and constantly document your private life for company marketing, you would quit immediately.
You'd walk right out the door.
But when you do that exact same thing to build your own personal brand, it feels like self-actualization. The cage didn't go away, we just built it ourselves and called it a lifestyle.
And we are fiercely protective of that cage.
Here's where it gets really interesting though, because think about what happens when you take that 1990s analog mindset and plug it into the modern internet.
Oh, it's a whole different ball game.
You aren't just building a brand with a resume and a nice suit anymore. You are plugging your actual psyche into an industrialized machine. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube don't just host your personal brand, they provide the behavioral infrastructure for it.
They give you the metrics to measure your authenticity in real time.
Yes, it is the literal industrialization of the authentic self.
And the underlying mechanism that makes it function relies on a very basic, very powerful biological reality, which is the dopamine feedback loop.
I mean, I literally catch myself doing this on LinkedIn all the time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I'll sit down to write a post about a genuine failure I had at work, something real and vulnerable. But right before I hit post, I find myself meticulously editing it to make sure the failure still makes me look like a growth-oriented leader. I am actively commodifying my own mistakes to ensure they perform well.
That is the exact mechanism in action. Because of neuroplasticity, this isn't just a harmless game you play online. It physically changes how you process reality.
That's terrifying.
Imagine you share a deeply personal, unfiltered struggle online. The system instantly measures the reaction. If it gets thousands of likes, your brain gets a massive rush of dopamine.
And the sense of connection you feel in that moment is totally real.
It is real. But simultaneously, the algorithm has cataloged that specific flavor of your vulnerability. It knows that your trauma or your quirkiness keeps people on the platform. It now implicitly demands more of that exact behavior from you if you want to maintain that feeling of connection.
So manipulative. Imagine being a stand-up comedian, but the audience is equipped with voting buttons.
Oh, interesting.
And they instantly shock you with a mild electric current if they are bored, or dispense a piece of candy if they are entertained, for every single syllable you utter.
That sounds exhausting.
It would be. Eventually, you aren't even writing jokes or thinking about the craft anymore. Your brain is just involuntarily twitching to the rhythm of the crowd. You're just reflexively hunting for the candy and dodging the shock.
That is a very visceral image, but neurologically, it is highly accurate. Over time, your brain physically begins to wire itself to view your entire life exclusively through the lens of what is useful for content.
Right.
You stop simply experiencing a sunset or a conversation or a tragedy, and you start mentally sourcing it for its engagement value.
Which leads to a really chilling conclusion from the research. Creators eventually aren't expressing their inner selves at all. They're simply iterating toward the most monetizable version of themselves until the human and the algorithm are essentially indistinguishable.
And yet, the whole time, the culture is cheering you on, telling you that you are just living your truth.
Your vulnerabilities and your most private experiences are no longer just fundamental parts of the human condition. They are A/B tested content.
Exactly.
But if the algorithm is that good at altering the individual, what happens when a whole group of people try to rebel against it together? Surely, genuine grassroots resistance still exists out there. Human beings are inherently creative. We form subcultures.
Historically, yes, we definitely do. But the researchers map out a fascinating timeline showing how the system has learned to neutralize subcultures and how the speed of that neutralization has violently accelerated.
Let's look at that timeline because it blew my mind. Take punk rock.
A classic example.
It started in the mid-1970s in gritty basement clubs like CBGB's in New York. It was an explicit, loud, deeply working class rejection of consumerism and polished commercial music. It was pure, raw anger at the establishment.
Very authentic.
But by 1977, punk aesthetics were already creeping onto the covers of mainstream magazines. By 1980, major record labels were frantically signing punk bands. And by the mid-80s, the high fashion industry was selling mass-produced, studded leather jackets for $2,000 a pop.
The rebellion was entirely genuine, but the market's ability to commodify it was just relentless. And this cycle played out over and over. It took roughly 5 to 10 years for grunge, hip-hop, rave culture, and skateboarding to transition from authentic, anti-establishment expressions into packaged, mass-market commodities.
But a 5 to 10-year cycle almost sounds quaint now.
Oh, completely.
The research points out that in the modern social media era, this co-option cycle hasn't just sped up. It has compressed from years down to a matter of days.
The compression is staggering. Let's trace it on a modern platform like TikTok.
Yeah, let's do that.
A genuine grassroots aesthetic or slang emerges from a marginalized community. Within hours, the algorithm identifies its engagement potential and amplifies it. Corporate trend forecasters spot it within 72 hours.
Wow, 72 hours.
Right. Fast fashion brands have physical products mimicking that exact visual language in production within a week. And by the week after that, the original creators are being offered brand deals to promote corporate products using the very identity their community organically created.
Okay, I need to push back here because this feels a bit cynical.
Fair enough.
Let's be real. It is incredibly easy to preach ideological purity when your bills are already paid. If I'm that working class kid who creates a brilliantly creative viral aesthetic, and a week later, I secure a massive brand deal that allows me to pay my rent, buy groceries, and help my family repeat it, I don't care about the movement.
Sure. Yeah.
That is a massive win for me. Haven't I basically beaten the system by forcing it to cut me a check? It feels like this theory is holding ordinary individuals to an impossible academic standard. Let the kid get paid.
That is a completely valid and incredibly important distinction. On a micro level, for that specific individual, it absolutely is a financial victory, and no one should fault them for taking the money to survive in a difficult economy.
Right.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the research asks us to zoom out and look at the macro level. When the system absorbs that creator, what happens to the underlying resistance that birthed the aesthetic in the first place?
It just disappears.
It is entirely neutralized.
So you're saying the system doesn't wait for a counterculture to become dangerous anymore. It just buys out the leaders before they even realize they are leading a rebellion.
Precisely. It absorbs the resistance while it is still in the incubator. The threat isn't crushed with force, it is smothered with sponsorship deals.
That is what?
Which raises a deeply unsettling question. Is genuine, lasting cultural resistance even biologically possible anymore in an environment that commodifies every single thought, aesthetic, and frustration before it can fully mature?
I'm trying to connect the ultimate dots here. So what does this all mean? If the system immediately neutralizes any group rebellion by buying it, and it neutralizes our individual frustrations by telling us to just self-optimize, then this entire structure isn't an accident.
Exactly.
If I am too exhausted from my job to unionize or demand better labor laws, but I spend my last shred of energy perfectly executing my 5 a.m. matcha meditation routine, I am doing exactly what the system wants. Is that the ultimate defense mechanism?
That is the grand thesis of the research. The authenticity and wellness movements aren't just quirky, accidental side effects of modern capitalism. They are its most sophisticated defense mechanisms.
It makes so much sense when you frame it like that.
When a population is overworked and economically insecure, they usually have two options. They can look outward, organize, and demand systemic change. Or they can redirect all of that frustration inward onto themselves.
And the authenticity trap is beautifully designed to make that second option, looking inward and blaming yourself, feel exactly like a noble, empowering journey.
Yeah.
Every ounce of energy you spend meticulously journaling about your personal brand is an ounce of energy you are not spending questioning why society makes you feel so inadequate to begin with.
Which leads to the darkest truth of all. The wellness industry doesn't just happen to profit from your anxiety, it fundamentally requires it.
Wow.
A population that has found genuine, quiet contentment outside the cycle of consumption is a population that simply cannot be monetized.
It's brilliant. The system produces the wound of isolation. It sells you the bandage of a meditation app. It generates deep social disconnection, and then turns around and charges you a monthly subscription fee to join a branded digital community.
Yep.
And it executes all of this while whispering in your ear that buying these things makes you a fiercely independent free thinker. The prison doesn't need to build walls if it offers a 5-star wellness program inside.
Which brings us to the ultimate practical question for anyone listening. How do you respond to this?
Exactly. To you, the listener, how do you actually find your real self inside a $6.8 trillion labyrinth designed to sell it back to you?
To answer that, we return to philosopher Byung-Chul Han. He concludes that this intense modern pressure for you to have a perfectly unique, beautifully coherent, and easily communicable self is entirely a demand of the market.
It is not a demand of the human soul. That is such a crucial distinction. But why does the market need my soul to be coherent?
Because the market needs you to be definable. If you are a stable, easily categorized brand with predictable likes, dislikes, aesthetics, and traumas, you can be cleanly segmented, targeted, and monetized by an algorithm.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
But human beings aren't naturally coherent. We are unstable, indefinable, messy, and contradictory. And messy, private human beings are incredibly difficult to sell targeted ads to.
Therefore, according to this framework, the most genuinely human, rebellious thing you can do is to outright refuse to be a brand at all.
Precisely.
Your authentic self isn't a project that needs to be constantly excavated, documented, polished, and put on display. It is something incredibly fragile that you protect by keeping it private, keeping it gloriously undefined, and keeping it offline.
The machine's greatest fear isn't your loud hashtag resistance online, because as we've seen, it can commodify that resistance in 72 hours.
Yeah, they'll just sponsor it.
Exactly. Its greatest fear is your silence. A person who is quietly whole, who finds deep meaning in their private life without ever feeling the need to post about it, represents a fundamental breakdown of the consumer cycle. To a multi-trillion-dollar industry, a quiet, contented person is a terrifying problem.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. The ultimate rebellion is just being quietly whole. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, something that pushes this theory into our actual daily reality.
Okay, lay it on us.
If the ultimate act of self-preservation is keeping your true self private, undefined, and completely unmonetized, how do we actually go about forging deep, genuine connections with other human beings in a society where nearly all of our social infrastructure, our town squares, our dating pools, our professional networks, has been moved onto these very platforms?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Can you remain entirely whole, entirely private, and still be truly deeply known by the people you love when the whole world communicates through the machine?
It might be the defining psychological challenge of our era. Finding a way to be known without being consumed.
It really is. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Remember that sometimes deliberately stepping back from the relentless demand to optimize yourself, choosing to just be a little messy and undefined, is the most powerful, liberating choice you can make.
Until next time, take care of yourselves.
You know, we spend so much of our lives desperately trying to write the perfect operating manual for our own minds, trying to engineer our way out of the maze. Maybe the trick isn't finding the fastest route through the maze. Maybe the trick is just realizing you don't have to run in it at all.